Bortlen's loyalty. Just 2 years ago, Bortlen went on live swearing he would never turn on Melly. There's nothing to snitch on. We're innocent, but what we saw in court just days ago tells a very different story. The look of a man cornered, ready to fold.
If you want to accept the deal, you can accept the deal today.
And now voices online are saying this can only mean one thing.
If he takes his plea, number one, he definitely has to testify against Melly.
Here is what I know the deal. It's the clip that has the entire rap world buzzing YNW Bortlen the one. Man who has stood by YNW Melly since the night 2 of their closest friends were murdered now. Allegedly begging Melly to let him live. This isn't a rumor mill special. This is the kind of footage that flips the whole YNW story on its head and makes you question loyalty, fear, and what really happened in that car.
If you wake up tomorrow and decide you changed your mind and you want to resolve this case, both cases, by way of a jury trial, that's not going to happen. If you want to accept the deal, you can accept the deal today.
From day one, the state framed Bortlen as the driver who helped cover up a double murder after the fact, then spun a drive-by tale at the ER. That's been their theory from the jump, and it's why when this begging for his life clip surfaced, the internet exploded. Was Bortlen really Melly's accomplice or his next target? Let's not sugarcoat the legal pressure. In court, the judge rattled off a mountain of charges that made the room feel like a funeral service for a man's future murder in the first degree. Mandatory life accessory, after the fact, 30 years. Tampering tied to a capital felony, up to life. Directing a criminal gang, up to life conspiracy. Up to life and unlawful use of a two-way device.
I'm going to go one at a time. In case number 19-1871 CF10A, right now, you're charged as follows. Counts 1 and 2 is murder in the first degree with a firearm. Those are capital felonies, which means it's a mandatory life sentence.
Here's the pivot that changed everything. The state dangled a deal, dropped the double murder counts if he resolves to lesser charges. A 16-year offer was put on the table. The kind of business decision that tempts any human facing an ocean of life sentences.
Okay. So, Mr. Henry, the state is telling me that they're extending an offer to you, and the offer is as follows. In case number 19-1871 CF10A, they're going to null process or drop counts 1 and 2, both first-degree murder charges.
But what he ultimately took was different and even more explosive for the narrative. In a separate proceeding, Bortlen ended up with 10 years plus 6 years of probation after pleading no contest to accessory after the fact, and select counts in the newer case.
Sir, do you understand all the pending charges and the maximum possible penalties involved?
On paper, that sounds like no snitching, but there's a catch that has the streets arguing, a profer. In plain English, that's a sit-down where you offer proof. Information the state believes will matter later. The judge even clarified the deal. Stands regardless, but a profer chat would follow.
Your answers have no bearing on me and have no bearing on this negotiated resolution. The deal you negotiated is the deal you negotiated.
And that's why perception went nuclear streams and commentary lit up. Academics told his audience, a deal like this usually means you'll have to testify.
If he takes his plea, number one, he definitely has to testify against Melly.
Bortlen tried to slam the door on that narrative himself.
There's nothing to snitch on. We're innocent.
So when this alleged Let Me Live footage hits the timeline, it doesn't just add drama, it adds motive. Was Bortlen acting out of legal desperation or literal fear? And if fear is in play, does the state try to use it to show a pattern of intimidation in Melly's retrial? Because remember, the courtroom around Melly is already on fire. His attorney, Raven. Liberty is under investigation tied to alleged witness tampering issues, and the defense has accused the state of misconduct involving a lead detective and alleged Brady problems.
This is a death penalty case. He's a death penalty defendant. It's his decision.
Members of the state attorney's office have committed obstruction of justice and attempted witness tampering.
Even the witness side plot is wild. Melly's ex, Mariah Hamilton, became a legal tug-of-war warrants material, witness fights, and a judge trying to thread the needle. She was ultimately errored with monitoring over defense objections. Now zoom back to that viral Bortlen footage. If prosecutors connect a begging for his life moment to the timeline studio drive or drop-off, shifting stories they'll argue it supports their broader case theory. Melly pulled the trigger and Bortlen helped clean it up, not because he was a mastermind, but because he was terrified and trapped, that placed the juror emotion, fear, survival, coercion. And the optics devastated the brotherhood. Image of YNW fractures on camera. One man faces the needle's shadow, another takes a deal. 2 are dead. If this clip is authenticated and gets in it, doesn't just bruise the defense, it could break it. Stay with me, because in part 2, we dissect the Content of that alleged Let Me Live exchange, what's audible, what lines up with known calls and timelines, and how the state could thread it into the proffer and plea. Breadcrumbs already left behind, and here's the chilling reality. This isn't happening. In a vacuum, Florida prosecutors know the power of narrative. They don't just want jurors to see paperwork. They want them to feel fear. They want them to look at Melly and think if even his own brother in arms begged him for mercy, then what chance did Sack Chaser and Juvie ever have? That's why this clip, even before it's verified, is sparking outrage online, because it plays directly into the prosecution's hands.
The time that he would spend would probably be like 8 years in jail. And then he'd be free.
This is the real contradiction. On one hand, Portland says he never snitched. He stayed solid, he never turned on Melly. On the other hand, his signature is on paperwork that got him a decade instead of a lifetime, and prosecutors don't hand that out of charity. So what's the truth? Is he a survivor who bent the system to escape death row shadow, or a man who been under pressure and gave the state exactly what it wanted? Look at how the judge framed it in court.
You have the right to maintain your plea of not guilty and have a trial in each case. You were given up all of those rights. The matter is going to be resolved today, right now, this afternoon.
That's not the language of a man standing tall. That's the language of a man cornered, a man choosing survival over everything else. Here's where the Let Me Live clip gains even more power. It's not just dramatic, it's symbolic. Symbolic of the night in 2018 when Bortlen allegedly watched two of his closest friends get shot, and symbolic of the years in courtrooms where he's been forced to choose between brotherhood and breathing air outside a prison cell. Now contrast this with Melly's position. He's not taking deals. He's not bending. He's facing the death penalty. His entire strategy is built on casting doubt on prosecutors, on detectives, even on his own defense team, being compromised by investigations. So imagine a jury watching a clip of his last remaining ally literally begging him to spare his life. It destroys that doubt. It paints Melly not just as a suspect, but as a predator, someone who inspires fear in the very people closest to him. And you can bet the prosecution is salivating. They've already fought tooth and nail over admissibility of evidence, alleged misconduct, and witness credibility. If they get this in, game over. But let's not forget the backdrop. Melly's ex-girlfriend Mariah Hamilton, being dragged into court as a material witness, fighting electronic monitoring detectives accused of lying on search warrants. His attorney, Raven Liberty, battling an investigation of her own. The entire trial is chaos, and into that chaos drops a clip of Bortlen begging. This isn't just evidence, it's ammunition. Now the internet is already divided. Fans of Melly's Scream setup insisting Bortlen's deal proves nothing, and that the footage is out of context. Others argue it's the final nail. Proof that Bortlen was always a pawn in Melly's game. And the real kicker with a proffer and play, prosecutors don't even need Bortlen to take the stand for the damage to be done. They can use his own words, his own pleas to paint the story. Clip becomes the emotional bridge that ties their legal arguments together. So here's where we land. As part 1 closes, the brotherhood of YNW is shattered. 2 men dead, 1 man sentenced, but breathing another awaiting retrial with death on the table, and in the middle of it all, a clip grainy raw viral allegedly showing YNW Bortlen begging YNW Melly to let him live. And that begs the question, was that plea made in 2018 or in 2025 when the deal went on the table? Because either way, it tells the same story Bortlen wanted out, and Melly held the power of life and death in his hands. Stay tuned, because in part 2, we break down the content of that alleged footage, what exactly was said, how it lines up with known calls and evidence, and why it could destroy Melly's defense strategy piece by piece. The clip itself, the alleged moment where YNW Bortlen pleads for his life, has taken on an almost mythical aura in the rap world. People aren't just watching it, they're dissecting it frame by frame, word by word, and that's what makes this such a bombshell. Because if the footage is authentic, it adds a dimension to the case that goes beyond legal paperwork. It shows fear, it shows hierarchy, it shows that when Melly was in the room, he controlled the air, everyone breathed. Now let's pause for a second. This isn't the first time the YNW case has had a smoking gun moment. Prosecutors argued from day one that Bortlen drove the bodies of Sack Chaser and Juvie to the hospital and lied about a drive-by. They had cell phone records, ballistics, and even testimony from officers who described the scene. Bullet holes everywhere, but somehow Bortlen untouched.
And you mentioned that there were some individuals inside. And when you approached the vehicle, was it apparent their condition?
Yes, they weren't moving.
But evidence alone didn't seal the deal in the first trial. The jury deadlocked, and Melly walked away with a mistrial. That's why this new footage matters so much. It's not just evidence, it's emotion. Jurors don't only convict on facts, they convict on stories. And this clip tells a story of dominance and submission, of one man holding another's life in his hands. Think about the timing. This alleged begging lines up eerily with the pressure faced in court. Remember when the judge laid out his charges? The weight of it was crushing, multiple life sentences stacked on top of each other. And yet in the same breath, prosecutors offered him a way out, dropped the murder counts, take accessory and tampering, and served 10 years instead to the public. That's a contradiction that smells like cooperation. To the defense, it's a ticking time bomb. Because if prosecutors can say, look, this man feared Melly so much that he begged for his life and took a deal, then they've cracked the code. They've connected courtroom paperwork to a human moment of terror. Now let's break down how prosecutors could weaponize this. First, they argue Bortlen wasn't some loyal soldier helping his friend. He was a hostage in the car. He drove the bodies not out of loyalty, but because he was too scared to do anything else. Second, they tie it to his plea deal. They'll claim he didn't flip because he wanted to betray Melly. He flipped because he knew the alternative was death, either at Melly's hands or behind bars for life. And third, they wrap it into their broader narrative of Melly as a manipulator who controls everyone around him, from his co-defendants to his girlfriends to even his attorneys. Don't forget, we've seen this same pattern play out with Mariah Hamilton. She was pulled into court under the label of material witness and forced onto an electronic monitor. The state's position is clear. Anyone close to Melly either ends up dead, silenced, or controlled. That's the drumbeat they'll pound in front of a jury. Now let's not forget the defense's counter-narrative. They've been screaming from the rooftops about prosecutorial misconduct, that detectives lied, that evidence was hidden, that witnesses were coached.
Probable cause that the witnesses under subpoena, the members of the state attorney's office, have committed obstruction of justice and attempted witness tampering.
If the defense can convince jurors that this "let me live" footage is taken out of context, or worse, that it's part of a smear, they can blunt its impact. They'll argue it's just another manipulation by the state, the same way they've accused prosecutors of manipulating search warrants and hiding Brady evidence. But here's the problem. Jurors don't forget visuals. They don't forget the sound of a man pleading. You can explain away paperwork, you can attack the credibility of a detective, but you can't unhear fear. And that's why this part of this saga is so crucial, because it's here where perception collides with reality. On the streets, Bortlen is screaming, "There's nothing to snitch on, we're innocent." But in the courtroom, the judge is locking him into a guilty adjudication on accessory and tampering. And in the viral footage, he's allegedly begging for his life. 3 different realities. One man and jurors will be asked to decide which version they believe. And here's where it gets darker. Some commentators believe that prosecutors don't even need to put Bortlen on the stand at all. With the proffer agreement in place, they already have enough to argue that he provided value to the state of.
Of course, with a proffer, it's an offer of proof, an offer of information or evidence and things of that nature that will ultimately come into play with a prosecution, assumingly YNW Melly's prosecution in this case. And so, as far as I'm understanding it to be, is that through this proffer agreement, of course, the prosecution wants him to cooperate, but there's no negative sanction for him if he does not.
That means they can hold up the plea deal in one hand and the viral clip in the other and say these are two sides of the same coin. Both prove the same thing. YNW Bortlen knew that siding with Melly was a death sentence, and if you think that's not going to sway a jury, you haven't been paying attention to how prosecutors operate in high-profile rap cases. It's not about the truth, it's about the narrative. That sticks. So what does this mean for Melly? It means his defense is walking into a buzzsaw. They'll have to counter not only the physical evidence and the accusations of intimidation, but now also the emotional weight of a video that shows his closest ally begging him for life. And if you're wondering why this matters to the public, it's because it paints a disturbing picture of the rap world itself. World where loyalty is shouted from rooftops but crumbles under pressure. A world where prosecutors know that one shaky video can do more damage than 1,000 legal briefs. So as this part closes, we're left with a brutal reality. Bortlen's fate may already be sealed, his reputation forever branded by this footage, but Mellier's fate, that's what's really on the line, because if this video is admissible in his retrial, it could be the emotional dagger that pierces through reasonable doubt. And that brings us to the most critical question of all. What happens if Melly himself responds? Does he stay silent? Does he attack Bortlen publicly? Or does he let his defense team try to spin it as a fabrication? Stay tuned, because in part 3, we'll unpack the ripple effect. How this viral clip could shatter not just Mellier's defense, but the entire YNW brand. Why the streets may never forgive Bortlen, and how the industry is reacting to the most shocking betrayal. Rap has seen in years the viral clip isn't just about a man begging, it's about context. And when you layer that context, with everything we know from the courtrooms, the plea, negotiations, and the behind the scenes, pressure, it transforms into something even bigger. It becomes a weapon. Let's rewind to the day of the plea hearing. The judge carefully walked Bortlen through every possible consequence, making sure there would be no buyer's remorse later. He spelled it out like a death sentence disguised as mercy.
If you wake up tomorrow or the next day and you decide to change your mind and you want to resolve this case, both cases, by way of a jury trial, that's not going to happen. If you want to have a trial, the trial starts tomorrow. If you want to accept the deal, you can accept the deal today. But there's not going to be any buyer's remorse.
That's the kind of ultimatum that makes the footage of him allegedly begging Melly all the more haunting, because it wasn't just Melly holding a man's life in his hands, it was also the state of Florida. Both sides had power. Over Portland, both demanded loyalty. Both made it clear choose wrong, and you now compare that with Melly's own defense strategy, his. Attorneys have been fighting tooth and nail, not just against evidence, but against the system itself. They've accused prosecutors of felony misconduct. They've clashed with the judge. In heated exchanges, they've even suggested that the state's lead detective lied and tried to manipulate witness testimony.
Someone described him just kind of getting punched twice in the head. And then the next thing, he's asking this deputy to lie for him.
So what happens when you put that narrative, the state is corrupt, side by side, with a clip of Portland crying out for survival? Jurors are forced into a psychological tug-of war. Who's the real manipulator here? The state or Mel? And here's the thing, the prosecution doesn't need to win every argument. They don't need to convince jurors that every single piece of evidence is flawless. All they need is one powerful, emotional anchor, and this video could be it. Think about the O.J. Simpson trial. The glove became the symbol. Think about Tekashi 69 in his rainbow. Hair in court became the meme that defined him. For Melly, this clip could become that defining image the moment the jury locks onto and never forgets the aftermath. If the previous part was about the shocking deal, and part 2 is about the fear, and part 3 is about the aftershock, because the fallout from this alleged let me live footage doesn't just stop with YNW Bortlen and YNW Melly. It rips through the entire rap industry, reshaping how people view loyalty, snitching, and survival in a way that feels eerily familiar to hip-hop history. Let's start with the courtroom. Prosecutors are now armed with 2 devastating weapons, a signed plea deal that shows Bortlen folded under pressure, and a viral clip that paints him as terrified of Melly. That 1-2 punch is lethal.